What if the front lines in Ukraine are quietly shifting, not with missiles, but with whispered words behind closed doors? Military analysts warn that Russia may be on the verge of redrawing the map of southern Ukraine, using negotiations, not tanks, as its sharpest weapon. The latest signal, covert meetings in Istanbul, barely noticed by the world, have set off a new and dangerous phase. Inside these secret sessions, Russian officials have reportedly made sweeping demands. They are pressing for Ukraine to hand over vital regions like Odessa and Nikolaev, without a shot fired. In this new strategy, Russia is trading brute force for relentless diplomatic pressure, hoping to win on paper what they have struggled to seize on the battlefield. If Russia's diplomatic offensive works, the consequences will echo far beyond Ukraine's borders. Western alliances, decades of sanctions, and billions in investments could be upended overnight. The question for Western leaders: can their policies withstand this sudden turn, or will they be outmaneuvered without warning? Let's trace how we arrived at this perilous crossroads, and why the conflict's rules have changed beneath our feet. First, we need to understand how Russia's diplomatic playbook has evolved, and why it is proving so hard for the West to counter. The roots of this strategy go deeper than most realize. This conflict's origin isn't found in columns of tanks, but in lines of text. Every negotiation resets the stakes. While the world watches smoke and armored vehicles, Ukraine's true struggle unfolds in quiet chambers and strained conference halls. In Istanbul, Russia delivered Ukraine 5 uncompromising demands. At the heart, Ukraine must pull its forces from Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson, and abandon all claims to these territories. News of Russian ultimatums stirs outrage across Ukraine. Western capitals grow uneasy, dreading what might follow if Kyiv refuses to yield. Reliable sources warn that Moscow is prepared to escalate, threatening to extend its reach into yet more regions, such as Dnipropetrovsk and Odessa, should its terms be denied. Failure at the negotiating table is not just a danger, it is a catalyst. Ukrainian defiance could trigger sharper Russian offensives and broader ambitions. Military analysts note that a subtle, more precarious phase has already begun. This chapter is less about sweeping assaults, more about quiet maneuvering and calculated risk. On the ground, Russia is ramping up its drone warfare. These unmanned craft now strike Ukrainian artillery and drone teams from distances once deemed unreachable. The contested gray zones sprawl wider, forcing Ukrainian units to retreat or risk encirclement. Meanwhile, Europe scrambles to ratchet up sanctions, trying to choke Russia's war economy. But Moscow's evolving tactics, both on the battlefield and at the table, are blunting Western pressure. Each diplomatic setback, each fresh demand, edges both sides closer to a larger, costlier conflict. The consequences are immense. If talks collapse, more regions face peril, millions could be uprooted, and the costs to global stability, energy supplies, and Western credibility may spiral beyond measure. But this is only the beginning. As each ultimatum lands, the room for compromise narrows, and the risks multiply. What happens when the world's most formidable sanctions machine finds itself out of firepower? In Tirana, European leaders huddle behind closed doors, weighing a drastic move, a total trade embargo on Russia. Already, 17 waves of penalties have battered everything from oil tankers to Russia's financial arteries, yet Moscow keeps adapting. Some demand tariffs soaring as high as 500%, while voices for total economic isolation grow louder. The mission: break Russia's war effort and force it back to the negotiating table. But reality refuses to cooperate. Russia reroutes exports through Asia, overhauls supply chains, and finds new partners, blunting the pain Europe tries to inflict. Enforcement is a shadow war of its own. As the West debates secondary sanctions, Russia spins up covert shipping, shadow banks, and fresh suppliers, slipping past embargoes designed to strangle its economy. Meanwhile, Western economies feel the backlash: energy shocks, tangled supply lines, and rising doubts about whether sanctions can still bend world events. If this arsenal fails, Other nations may soon defy Western pressure, sensing that economic warfare has limits after all. If escalation stalls here, what tools are left, and who bears the cost as both sides edge toward the brink? With each new measure, the room for maneuver narrows. Russia and Europe now face a perilous standoff, searching for leverage in a contest neither can afford to lose. The next phase will not unfold in boardrooms or trenches, but in the ambiguous gray zones that defy control. Right now, Russia signals that if talks collapse, its ambitions may reach far beyond Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson. Sumska, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, and even Odessa could soon appear on Moscow's list, turning implied threats into stark realities in a matter of days. For Ukraine, the price is already staggering. Its military, stretched to the limit, scrambles to hold shifting front lines while Russian tactics become more adaptive. Drones, electronic warfare, and relentless assaults make it nearly impossible for Ukrainian forces to regroup or stabilize any sector. Meanwhile, Europe sharpens its sanctions, drawing in fresh allies from the Balkans and beyond. But this widening front brings its own pain. Public discontent over economic fallout rises, and people across the continent begin to question whether the sacrifices truly serve their interests. Western unity, once unwavering, now teeters. Smaller nations quietly wonder if further escalation is wise. There is a growing fear that a single miscalculation, perhaps a naval clash in the Black Sea, could ignite direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. The fate of regional stability, global markets, and the credibility of the rules-based order hangs by a thread. Each escalation, each severed line of dialogue, risks plunging the world into chaos. What lessons might emerge, and what signals should leaders and citizens watch for in the days ahead? The coming weeks will test every assumption and alliance. How the world responds may shape the next decade. In an era of shifting frontiers and fragile alliances, how do you pierce the fog of modern conflict? Today's battles are not just waged with tanks and guns. They play out in negotiation rooms, on trading floors, and across digital airwaves. Russia's campaign for southern Ukraine is fought as much with diplomatic pressures and propaganda as with soldiers and shells. Do not count on a single tool or tactic. Both Russia and the West have grown skilled at adaptation. When one measure loses its bite, another emerges. Sanctions, embargoes, and media offensives are met with counter-moves, and each side finds new ways to exploit opportunity or sidestep constraint. For investors and policymakers, it is not enough to follow headlines. Watch for the tremors beneath: a sudden embargo, a surprise territorial demand, or an unanticipated military maneuver. These signals often precede major shifts, sometimes days before official confirmations. Misinformation thrives in this environment. Trusting only a single narrative or official report leaves you exposed. Instead, cross-check sources, domestic and foreign, to build a clearer, more nuanced view of unfolding events. The consequences ripple far beyond battlefields. Second-order shocks, such as soaring fuel prices, disrupted trade routes, or new security threats, can swiftly impact your finances, your business, and your daily life. A fresh round of sanctions might send energy costs skyrocketing, or a sudden escalation could jolt markets across continents. Failing to read these rapid shifts as they happen may mean lost money, missed warnings, or costly strategic errors. When facts on the ground can change overnight, the price of ignorance grows ever steeper. So as the crisis accelerates, how do you avoid being left behind? The key is to sharpen your situational awareness. The next move may be brewing in places few are watching. This is not merely a story of Ukraine and Russia. It is a stark warning to anyone who assumes that today's world order is permanent. What unfolds now is a contest that reaches far beyond battlefields or negotiation rooms. Russia presses for gains in southern Ukraine, advancing not only with soldiers, but through relentless diplomatic demands. Europe counters with tightening sanctions, hoping to cripple Moscow's economy, yet both sides are burning through their options for compromise. The tempo is dizzying. Russia quickly adapts, counters, and sometimes blunts Western pressure, casting doubt on the power of sanctions once thought decisive. What is truly at stake is not just territory, but the very credibility of policy tools that have shaped the international order for generations. For you, this is not distant drama. It is a living example of how swiftly global certainties can dissolve. The consequences ripple everywhere: rising energy prices, shifting security promises, and a weakening trust in international agreements. Miss these signals, and you risk costly mistakes for your investments, your policies, or your own safety. The lesson is unmistakable. Only those who adapt will avoid the heavy costs of tomorrow's chaos. Stay alert, question easy answers, and never assume today's status quo is safe. As this conflict enters a volatile new phase, understanding how quickly the ground can shift is more vital than ever.